Hello, thank you for stopping by. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to be making a couple of cool t-shirts for summer. We'll be making two t-shirts out of two different knit materials. The first one is this linen rayon knit with a four-way stretch, but it has a little bit more stretch in one direction than it does in the other. So we'll have to be mindful of that when we're cutting out the pattern pieces. And the second one is from this silk-viscose, which is a type of rayon knit. And just like the first one, it has more stretch in one direction than it does the other. And this one looks like it might be pretty tricky to work with. Knits in general can be intimidating at first, but once you get some practice, they really are a breeze to sew. There are a couple of tricks that will make it easier. First of all, you want to be using a ballpoint or jersey needle. These will slip through the fabric without piercing the fibers. If you pierce the fibers and then knit, it can unravel a giant hole. So you want to be using a ballpoint needle, and you want to make sure it is the correct weight for the fabric. These are very lightweight, so I'm going for a 70-10, which is a very lightweight needle. Another thing I like to use are ballpoint pins as well. I keep these separate from my normal pins. For the same reason I use a ballpoint needle, they slip through the fabric rather than piercing it and causing bigger holes. A serger can be very helpful for working with knits, but it's not necessary. I'm going to be using my machine today. There are just a couple of simple settings that you have to pay attention to with the regular machine, and you can sew knits on them just fine. So the pattern we're using today is the Brando Tee. It is a free download I got from mood.com. So I thought it'd be fun to give that a try. This is just a simple t-shirt pattern, so there's not that much to look at. So I thought it might be a little bit interesting if I could compare it to my normal t-shirt pattern, which is a Kwik Sew. Let's get into that now. The two patterns are laid out in front of me with the Kwik Sew on top of the Brando Tee. Looking into the measurements a little bit, the Kwik Sew has 5 sizes, small through extra, extra large. The Brando has 10 sizes, 34 through 52. The Kwik Sew sizes basically encompass 3 chest measurements each. For example, the small is for 34, 35, and 36 inch chest measurement. The extra, extra large is for 50, 51, and 52 inch chest measurement. The Brando Tee goes off the chest measurement as well, following even numbers. So you have 34, 36, 38, all the way up to 52. And so effectively what that does is just gives you half sizes between the sizes that the Kwik Sew gives you, so you can get a little bit better of a fit. These pattern pieces are cut out for my measurement, which is a medium in a Kwik Sew and a 40 inch in the Brando Tee. The Kwik Sew medium is for 38, 39, and 40. And what I'd actually done originally was cut out halfway between the medium and the large for me with the Kwik Sew pattern. I did trim that down to the medium line so we could see the accurate measurements of the Kwik Sew pattern compared to the Brando. But you can see the Brando Tee does come out a little bit wider than the Kwik Sew in the front and back pieces here. And before I trimmed it down, they were much closer in size. But it is nice that the Brando Tee gives you that option without you having to sort of figure it out yourself. Taking a closer look at the first pattern piece, the Brando is just a little bit wider than the Kwik Sew. The arm side scoops in much more dramatically on the Brando. And the Kwik Sew is a little bit longer on the front compared to the Brando. We can't really compare collar shapes because I have the Kwik Sew cut out for a V-neck instead of the standard collar, and the Brando Tee is the standard rounded collar. Moving on to the second piece, with the shoulder seams lined up, the back neckline on the Brando Tee is much more shallow than it is on the Kwik Sew, and again the arm size scoops in much more deeply. There is a little bit of shape to the side seam of the Brando Tee compared to the Kwik Sew, which is just a straight line. Moving on to the sleeve piece, the differences in the arm size shows up much more dramatically in the Brando compared to the Kwik Sew. You can see how much higher the Brando sleeve piece rises compared to the Kwik Sew, and that is going to, again, be part of the shoulder seam and the arm side. Comparing the collar piece, the Brando is on top of the Kwik Sew here because it is a little bit smaller, but it also has smaller seam allowances, so I think they are actually a perfect match for each other. So I think the Brando Tee is going to have a little bit more fit in the side seams. The shoulder seams will fit a little bit more nicely, and the arm side will be a little bit tighter. All in all, I'd recommend going with the Brando Tee pattern if you can, but if you can pick the Kwik Sew up for less than it would cost to print the Brando Tee, you know, that's not a bad option. You don't have to tape it all together or trace it out. It's still a great t-shirt pattern. There's nothing wrong with it at all, and it comes with better directions than the Mood pattern does. So if you're new to this, that might be a good option for you to go for. Now it's time to move on to tracing the pattern pieces onto the fabric and cutting it out, which can be quite tricky when you're working with slippery knits. This is the linen rayon blend. The cutting layout from the pattern showed to fold both selvages in to meet at the middle, and then lay the front and back pieces together against the folds to cut. I would have followed that if this were a woven fabric, but sometimes trying to cut a fabric on the fold is more trouble than it's worth, especially with lightweight knits. Lining the layers up can take forever, and then it's hard to keep them from shifting while you mark and cut. What I did was just lay the pattern piece down, then traced it and flipped it over, and traced the other half. If you're using a fabric that's easy to cut, this might be a waste of time, but if you're using a fabric that's tricky, it will save you time and heartache. You know, there's never any one specific way to do things in sewing. It all just depends on the situation and personal preference. I tried pinning the pattern piece to the fabric, and the pins kept getting in the way of the ruler I was using, so when I flipped it, I just used pattern weights. I'm using a regular piece of chalk here. I often use the waxy type of chalk, but it doesn't always work well. My basic method for marking lines on knits is to try to hold the fabric as stable as possible, and then to make short strokes with the chalk using very light pressure. Sometimes I'll push the ruler down and it will hold the fabric kind of stable, which helps. Sometimes I will put my left hand down with the thumb and forefinger spread apart and use them to keep a small section of the fabric stable while I mark it with the chalk. It just depends on the spot I'm tracing and what I think might work best. It's all trial and error. I've gotten kind of hit or miss about marking my notches, especially for such a simple pattern. And I didn't mark them on the first side of the pattern. Oops. For cutting this out, I'm just using a pair of shears. I'm keeping them on the table, not lifting them up. If you have a rotary cutter, that's a great option. I have very limited storage space, and I have to fold my work table down when I'm done with it. So I've decided that I'll forego using a rotary cutter and just stick with scissors. That's another one of those things that varies depending on the situation and preference. You do you. You can obviously see that even though I tried to trace the pattern as carefully as possible, the chalk lines are still kind of rough. If I were doing something structured or something meant to be really nice, obviously that would be important, but I would make something like that out of a different fabric. Fabric choice is super important. So many of my sewing projects have failed because I chose the wrong fabric, but I've learned from all of them. I really should learn to plan more carefully to prevent those types of mistakes to begin with. I just barge into something new without a care in the world, but I am the sort of person who is always ready to just scrap something if it isn't working and move on, so I don't really get bogged down by failure. I always learn more from my mistakes than I do from planning, so I'm not wary about making them. That's how I learn. Sorry for the tangent. I cut out all of the pieces for both shirts the same way, and now it's time to start pinning the pieces together and sewing. So before I get started on the actual construction, I'm just going to do some stitch tests to see what works best with this fabric. You know, it's a silk viscose lightweight jersey, so that could, you know, potentially be quite a pain in the butt to sew. We'll see how it goes. I haven't changed my tension settings or anything. I often don't have to, but we'll see. I'm going to put it my machine width and length for the stitches to medium settings for both. This is a 7010 jersey needle, which means it has the ball point at the end. It looks like I lucked out and it's just going to work correctly. That's why I very much love Cousin Sue. My last project I sewed was outerwear. I put like heavy duty thick outerwear fabric through her. She sewed it great. And my next project I'm sewing with silk jersey, and I just changed out the needle and it's still sewing great. This is just dual duty Coats and Clark polyester thread. Yeah, that's going to work. Awesome. If you don't know already, you can also sew stretch fabrics using a straight stitch. You're just putting it a medium to longer stitch setting. You don't want a super fine stitch for stretch, and you just want to do a moderate amount of tension on the fabric to stretch it out, and then just feed it through with maintaining the tension on the fabric. And Bob is your uncle. So it was stitched in there with the fabric stretched out under tension, and when the fabric retracts, the straight stitch has room to stretch a little bit. I don't know how well that's showing up, but yeah. The straight stitch is holding up as well under the tension on this jersey material as the zigzag is. I'm going to get ready pinning everything together and start the construction. I've worn both t-shirts a few times now and I'm very happy with them. I'm glad I decided to experiment with different fabrics other than just the standard cotton jersey. The silk viscose that I'm wearing right now is lightweight, breathable, soft against the skin. It almost feels like I'm wearing nothing at all, which is great. It also has a nice sort of expensive sheen to the fabric. I like that too. So it's great for wearing on days when I just want to lounge around and be cool, but still look kind of nice. The linen rayon blend is a little bit thicker, but it's a little bit looser of a weave too, so it breathes really well, and it does a really good job of wicking sweat away from the body. So that shirt is a good option to wear on days when I'm going to be moving around a little bit more in the heat. Not necessarily for sports or anything like that, but if I'm walking around on a hot sunny day, it's a great option because it'll help keep sweat under control. With both of these shirts, I had a little bit of puckering in the collar. That's a problem I keep having with knits, so I definitely need to work on that, try to get better. But I'm still going to wear the shirts. I'm very happy with the way they look. I put a lot of hard work into them. They are very comfortable to wear, so I'm going to wear them with pride. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the future.